Hey guys, welcome back to Maury's Music. Today's podcast is going to feature the Martin Rhodes series. My name's Maury Rutsch.
And I'm Spoon Phillips.
And we have a lot to talk about. Spoon, how are you doing today?
I am doing just great. It's always great to be back. I kind of wish I was in Coaldale, but I'm here at home in Brooklyn, New York, and have been checking out some of the new Rhodes series models online actually recently.
So you're the one in New York that wants to be in Coaldale. I knew there was somebody.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes it's the opposite, but...
I guess I want to first ask you a little bit about how much you know about the Rhodes series, and maybe can you comment on how long it's been around?
Sure. The Rhodes series, the original Rhodes series, began in the mid-1990s. At 1996, they put out a guitar called the DM, and I to this day cannot remember why they called them M, but the original Rhodes series, there was the DM, and that was followed shortly by the OOM and the OMM and so forth. They were immediately very well received. They were even more affordable than the D1 at that time and the D1R. And the Rhodes series from the very beginning was designed with touring musicians in mind. And the first person I knew that owned a DM played an HD28 as his favorite guitar, but he bought a DM to take into on the road to honky tonks and those kind of places, where he could plug and play an acoustic electric guitar that still sounded good as an acoustic guitar without having to take his prized Martin with him into rowdy performance spaces.
Interesting. And I wonder if I could ask you, do you know anybody who owned a D1?
Yes, I actually know two people that are good friends of mine, and one of them is named Maury Rutsch.
You walked right into that one. I'm proud to say that was my very first Martin guitar. I want to say the year was 1996, maybe 95, and I could not believe that a Martin guitar fell into my price range. And I mean, I grew up just loving that brand, and I was, ever since I really discovered, Simon and Garfunkel and a lot of great acoustic music like CSN, as soon as I figured out what that stuff was, my radar was just completely and blindly aimed at Martin guitar. When I finally had an opportunity to get a D1, that was my first Martin. And of all these live streams and virtual tours and conversations I've had with you and other people, it's I'm a little bit embarrassed to say I think this might be the first time I've ever said that on the air. If anybody would like a little bit of trivia, my first Martin guitar was a D1, so that was a precursor even to the Rhodes series in general.
Well, I'm not surprised. They, like you said, it all of a sudden opened up Martin guitars to people who at that time could only dream about owning a D18. And I had a roommate, a friend of mine's stepbrother, moved in right from college with boxes and boxes of tapes of bootlegs from Bruce Springsteen and the Grateful Dead and all that, and had admired my guitar playing and my guitars. And so I helped him pick out a guitar that turned out to be a D1. It was quite successful, and as an instrument and in general. And he learned more studying over the first year than I had probably learned in my first 10 years, and still has it. He lives in Pittsburgh now. But the Rhodes series that came out right after that offered very similar to what they are now. The Rhodes series today, most of those guitars have a solid core of African mahogany with an attractive veneer on the outside of them. So they're not a veneer guitar in the old traditional sense of being plywood. It's still got a piece of solid wood that then has attractive wood on the outside. And the difference is there are still some Rhodes series being made today that actually have solid back and sides. It really depends on the particular model. But the original Rhodes series, they were all that Kaya is the species of African mahogany, Kaya core with some sort of veneer on the outside.
That brings up a really good question I have for you. Mike Dickinson, a good friend of ours from Martin Guitar, if I'm not mistaken, he's currently working in the part of the company that either helps to source wood, or he's sometimes the guy that's in the jungle with a safari hat and finding these logs and this lumber. I thought I overheard you guys both talking about the argument, why wouldn't Martin want to use, for example, in a GPC 13E or an SC 13E, when you have the fine koa veneer that's going to be sandwiched around the kaya that you speak of. Can you kind of bring us back into that conversation you had with Mike? Why or why not Martin chose to do it that way instead of finding solid pieces of the same wood?
Yeah, it was really Michael. Michael is one of the wood buyers, and he focuses on for the most part, the alternative woods. Linda, she's still, if she hasn't retired yet, I know she's getting pretty close, but she was forever the wood buyer when it came to mahogany, rosewood, and those kind of woods. And Michael does everything else. And that safari hat you mentioned was actually a gift from me when he got that job. And
Oh, that's right.
and but it was actually Tim Teal who just told me recently that their research showed that in that price range that people wanted beautiful looking guitars, and that was more important to a great deal of their customers. And some of those, and now that they're using the Ziricote, and some of that stuff is just magnificent wood. Ziricote is difficult to work with. It breaks easily when they're trying to bend it. It's fine once it's bent, but not only do they not are they not able to find it in the quantities required to start making solid Ziricote models. You can get it as a custom shop order. But same thing with the koa, as some of this koa is really good looking koa, and as a veneer, they could get a lot more of it because it's a much thinner slice. And so they tried it as an experiment, and their sound tests were all very favorable. And so it's cost effective. These guitars, if they tried to use solid koa, A, you would be getting a lot of drab looking koa, and B, it would cost a lot more. Then the guitar would just end up having to cost a lot more. And so it's a price point thing. And Martin's always been, going back to the 1800s, was always very concerned about where their products fit in their product range, and offering guitars at various prices.
Huh. And remind me, what grade were you in the 1800s?
Well, you should respect your elders.
I will try. I will try.
Before I come out there and box your ears, young fella.
Where do you? What's your opinion as far as the tonal properties when we talk about this solid piece of kaya with fine veneer on both sides for that sandwich? What that really means is when you look inside a D13E Ziricote, the inside of the back is that fine veneer. It's not just like they put the pretty wood on the outside of the guitar and left the inside unchanged. Can you speak to that point?
Yes, I was, when this first happened with the modern series, the modern road series, when they came out with the koa veneers, I was surprised when I showed up at the factory and went into the sound testing room, and I thought, is my eyes playing tricks on my ears, and that I was hearing this high overtone shimmer in the trebles that sounded like koa. And I had originally gone in skeptical, thinking, okay, well, if these are all Kaya veneers, so these guitars are really all essentially Kaya guitars, and so does that mean they're all going to sound the same, no matter what veneer you use? And it turned out that's not the case, and it's because they're lining the inside of the guitar with the koa. What finally proved it to me once and for all was the first time I played the Zero-Cody fine veneer. Clearly sounds different. Everything's, I mean, basically identical in terms of the guitar, except for the veneer. And the Zero-Cody definitely sounds warmer and darker and has more mid-range overtone to it. And the Koa is has much more of that very clear notes that's closer to sounding like mahogany or maple, except for that high complexity shimmer. So the veneers lining the inside of the guitar with the veneer, actually, that's what's reflecting the sound waves. So it's actually coloring the tone in very much the same way that a solid piece of Zero-Cody or a solid piece of Koa would.
So to your point, is it fair to say that if Martin made two guitars, one being solid Kaya back and sides and no veneer, that would sound like mahogany, and if Martin made a solid back and sides with solid Koa, that would clearly sound like Koa? Is it fair to say that the way they make them now, with only the core being Kaya and the veneer being Koa, that sounds more like solid Koa or more like solid mahogany?
Oh, well, like I'm saying, I was surprised that it sounded like Koa, but then I thought it makes sense when Christian Martin first started building guitars in America. A great many of his early guitars were lined on the inside, so they were. I can't remember if they were lined with spruce or cedar, but that was really where the tone was coming from. It wasn't coming from the rosewood back and sides or whatever, the Powell Ferro or whatever he was using for back and sides. It was coming from that interior sound chamber, and then at some point, somebody, either he or his son or somebody in the company, began to realize, well, if you make it without that inner sound chamber wood, that you're then hearing the tonal coloring of the actual back and sides. So that's a long answer to say that it doesn't sound like an African mahogany guitar like I thought it would. And it would be easy. It would be pretty easy to test this out because you can buy Rhodes Series dreadnoughts in solid sapele. So that is a solid African. It's not the exact same species, but I would guess if there's any difference with these Rhodes Series guitars that have gone back to using a Kaya core with a fine veneer on the outside, that the solid sapele back and side guitars might be more resonant. That's just a total guess because it's a slightly thicker piece of wood. It's operating as a one when it's vibrating in that sort of drumhead diaphragm way and creating the sound waves that are going to go out the sound hole. Maybe the solid wood it might be a little more complex, a little more robust, or a little more resonant, but I've never tried to test that out to see if that's really true. I was just surprised that the Zero-Cody veneer guitars and the Koa veneer guitars sounds as different from one another as they do.
All right, so we're talking about the Rhodes Series from Martin Guitar. In your professional opinion, who are these guitars for?
Well, Martin's opinion, they'll tell you they're for professional musicians. They have always aimed this at what they called performing musicians. And so I would say it's a broad target audience. You have people who own a D45 that doesn't want to take their D45 on the road or doesn't want to take their D45 into small performance spaces where there's going to be a bunch of people carousing around. And you have people who are just now looking to step up to their first professional level acoustic electric guitar. And that's the other thing now. The modern Rhodes series come as acoustic electric instruments. They have only recently offered the D12 without electronics, which I think is a wonderful idea because it's a really nice sounding guitar for people who either don't want to. But I guess we'll get to that when we start talking about the models. But we should talk about that a little bit later. But okay. It's designed for people who are going to get out in front of an audience and really need a quality pickup system in a guitar that also sounds good with a microphone. People they aim it for people who actually record music at home and in studios, the whole works. So it's their affordable line of professional level instruments.
We hope you're enjoying this podcast, and we really, really do value your input.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that we get more questions from the people listening to our podcasts, because it gives us food for thought, and we always enjoy answering listeners' questions. So let me ask you a question, Maury. When you mentioned professional opinion, you've been selling Martin guitars for many years to earn your bread and cheese. And over those years, during the years where you could have walk-in customers, which hopefully will be happening again soon, what percentage would you say people came in to play Martin guitars of various levels and ended up taking home a Road Series instrument?
If I'm remembering correctly, I think the Road Series almost always had an equal opportunity to catch somebody's attention and keep it. It seems like a lifetime ago since it was really happening, but if somebody would come in, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for them to ask us, can I see what you have in an OM size? I know I like long scale. I know I like 1 3/4. What do you have in that, kind of thing? And I would say to them, probably these 9 or 10. And once you get past the questions about, budget and do you prefer rosewood or mahogany, and we would go through a long list of what questions can we ask that helps speed up the process and only put the right guitars in front of these customers and see what's not going to waste their time. More often than not, you might see somebody wanted to play a D28, a D18, and they ended up playing something similar in the Road Series, something in the X Series. It really depended on their budget to go a lot higher than that, but many times when somebody was presented with an opportunity to buy the same kind of guitar in the X Series and the Road Series and maybe a 16 and then a Standard Series, I'll really, really be honest to say I think more than half the time a Road Series instrument was in their final decision. I'm not sure if they left with the Road Series 50% of the time, but it was interesting. It almost never happened in a way where people just dismissed it. And one of my questions I'm going to get to you later is sometimes the final decision was just, this one's made in Mexico, the Standard's made in Nazareth, and there are those customers that'll come into a store and just have something on their mind. They want to buy a Nazareth-made Martin, and that's just at the top of their wish list, and it kind of influences where they go and which direction they pursue the purchase. But I would say at least half of the people ended up buying a Road Series guitar that had an opportunity to play one against a Standard and a 16. And that, answer your question with the question, if that makes any sense. That leads me to something I would ask you. When people want to say the term, I want a Nazareth-made Martin, I want something made in USA, can you speak to the point that we should be fully transparent? These Road Series instruments from Martin are made in their Navajo facility in Mexico. But I've always been told by some people that I really trust at the Martin Guitar Company that if you just teleported yourself into the Mexico facility at Martin, you would not know you're not in Nazareth. They're so similar. The build quality, the machinery, the training and the tools, and the employees, everything is done the same way. It's just as if you take the Nazareth plant and forklift it across the border. What can you say about that?
Well, I've heard the same thing. I've never actually been there myself, but there again, if you wanted to think about electric guitars, and the classic comparison is the Mexican-made Fenders, Stratocasters or whatever. And there are people that I want something made in the USA, but there are other people that play a Mexican-made Strat and absolutely love it, and and they're very happy to have the much lower price tag because it's just a reality of the American way of life that wages are much higher here, and wages and benefits and all that stuff, and it's just part of the reality. You mentioned budgets, and I think the one sort of guitar player that haven't had their say in this discussion are the people who would love to have a D18 or a D28, but they can't justify the price because they have other priorities. They have they have a family. They have a boat at the lake. They have to decide where their money's going to go, but they want the best guitar that they can get. They like the Martin sound. They like the Martin the tradition that's behind Martin, and the Road Series offers a lot of those kind of people an opportunity to own a Martin guitar with the kind of tone that they can play for 4 hours alone in a room and never be bored with. And sure, there's going to be people who want something made at the factory, and if they're really going to stick with that, then they can look at the 15 series and the 16 series to try to find something. But if their true budget just won't allow them to come up to that price point, you get a lot of guitar with a Road Series Martin.
And I should really take my foot at least halfway back out of my mouth. I did not mean to imply that the Mexican-made Martins are exactly the same as the Nazareth-made instruments, with the only difference being where the factory is. There's one key component that I honestly, unintentionally glossed over. These Road Series Martin guitars are made with what's called the mortise and tenon neck joint, not the traditional dovetail neck joint found on standard series guitars made in Nazareth. What's your take on the M&T versus the dovetail construction, completely taking the factory location out of the equation?
Well, to take a look at the mortise and tenon neck joint outside of how it fits into Martin, that actually goes all the way back to the late 60s or early 70s. And I believe Michael Gurian is credited with inventing that kind of neck joint. And technically a dovetail is a mortise and a tenon, but the dovetail, the traditional dovetail, is a very wide V piece of wood that's shaped like the tail of a bird. That's where it comes from. And the mortise and tenon was much more very slender mortise fitting and tenon fitting together. And so it was used by a variety of builders over the years. Martin started using it on the D1, and so everything below the standard series had a mortise and tenon. All the 16s, starting in 1996 on up, and the 15s, they were all M&T neck joint guitars until they invented the simple dovetail, which is actually created and cut by an amazing robot. And then sometimes finished by hand if it doesn't fit entirely perfectly, but it really fits remarkably well. And it is a simpler version than the dovetail. It's not as big in terms of how much mass is involved in that neck joint. So, but I think the simple dovetail neck joint guitars sound virtually identical to the traditional dovetail guitars. The M&T neck guitars, to my ear, sound different. They're still Martins, and like going back to the 16s again, or the original Aura guitars, all those guitars that had mortise and tenon, it's not as thick and throaty a sound to my ear. It's very vibrant top notes that sound like they're kind of separated from the undertone in a way that a lot of non-Martin modern guitars sound, all the way up to people whose guitars cost $25,000. A lot of builders today don't use traditional dovetail neck joints, and so the M&T sound to me is very clear, crisp, clean. They sound brighter than their dovetail neck joint counterparts, if you will. So it's not exactly the same, but it's still a Martin sound, and one that's been around since the mid 1990s, basically.
And I've been told, to put this into context for our listeners, if you make 25 mortise and tenon necks and 25 mortise and tenon bodies, they can all be interchanged. And when it comes time for production, you can find any of those bodies, any of those necks, make it fit, and that at least that's part of the reason that the process gets streamlined equals the process is less expensive. Is it true to say that because the dovetail neck joint, when the Martin guitar starts in production in a dovetail instrument, they give the neck and the body a serial number, and those two things get separated at the beginning. After all the production happens and all the different stages of the way that a guitar is created at Martin, eventually that specific neck finds that specific body because they're the only two that fit together. Do you believe, without taking 2 hours to answer this, do you believe that's part of the reason that a dovetail neck joint does make for a better connection?
Yeah, I think so. And there is there's a craftsman sitting there and fine tuning with a hand chisel, to make that fit. It is the single most expensive thing about a Martin guitar, save the cost of the pearl artisans inlaying a D45. But it requires the workers that make the highest wage in the factory, the highest skilled workers, and it is the longest, most lengthy thing that happens in the making of a Martin guitar, and it's why it is the number one reason the standard series instruments are so much more expensive than the 16s and everything below that. So you are well, I say you get what you pay for with when you get a standard series guitar. Again, a lot of people are perfectly happy with Martins that don't cost that much, and I've said for years that the Road Series is the best bang for the buck when it comes to getting a Martin guitar. And then we will certainly talk about the X Series at some point, but not today. And that's another option as well. But I think if you're really looking for tone versus expenditure, the Road Series is really hard to beat, not just in the Martin lineup, but competitively in American guitar manufacturing.
Oh, I'd completely agree with that last point. I mean, if you're going to spend between $800 and $1,000, you really, really have to look pretty far to get what you're getting in the Road Series from Martin. And that brings me to my next question for you. What are your experiences with the Road Series, either as an owner, player, or in the audience? Because I know you bop around to a lot of places in New York City, and I'll go out on a limb and say you must have seen some of these in bars and pubs. And what can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I have not ever owned a Road Series instrument, but I have certainly seen them at open mics in New York. There was a place that I used to play with a trio, and the early part of the evening was sort of a young singer-songwriter showcasey thing, and that was very, very common to see Road Series instruments at that event. And like I said, I know a guy who was a professional. He was actually worked at a now long gone guitar store here in New York City, but was a basically full-time gigging musician who played a Road Series Dreadnought for any time he was gigging, and you see him subway buskers. It is a pretty common occurrence in New York City. So Maury, I have another question for you, and I would like to know, from your opinion, what are the most popular Road Series instruments, and maybe we should, before we go, maybe we should go through each of the levels, the 10, the 12, the 13, and talk about what sets them apart from one another. How's that sound?
Oh, I'd love to do that. We right now I'm taking a look at what we currently have in stock. If you're asking me what the most popular Road Series model has been for us, it's kind of funny. I probably would point to the GPCs. There's a GPC in more than one trim level here, and it's, I think, historically, and I could be wrong, the GPC is not the most popular body size from Martin. When you look at any series, whether it's the Road Series or the X's, the 16s, I think when it comes to other series, we do better with the Dreads and the OMs. For some reason, my memory is going to say that I'm really happy with the way we sell GPC 11s, GPC 13s, especially now with the brand new Zero Codes that came out a few months ago. I would say GPCs in general are the more popular Road Series guitars here at Maury's Music. In a bigger umbrella, what Martin thinks of that and other stores, but here at Maury's Music, it's probably the GPCs.
Well, the Grand Performance body size, with the cutaway especially, is a very modern, progressive guitar design. And those kind of, they some people call them small jumbos or mini jumbos, had been around for a long time. And it really wasn't until Taylor came out with their size 14 that it really took on a greater popularity. And Martin's version of that kind of mini jumbo, I think, appeals more to younger players. And younger players, by and large, tend to have a um, a budget that's going to bring them into the Rhodes series. You mentioned the GPC 11. That's one of those guitars that has solid. That's an all solid wood guitar that's got the solid sapele back and sides and a solid citrus spruce top. And again, great bang for the buck. Also, perhaps with the M&T neck joint, you have that sort of more modern sound to it compared to the dovetail neck joint. And I think that that slightly deeper, slightly wider than an OM body um, would lend itself to adding a little more oomph in the mids and the low mids. And that may be one of the reasons those guitars are as popular as they are.
We should probably take this opportunity to let our listeners know what we mean when we say 11, we say 10. There basically are different trim levels within the Rhodes series. And sometimes people casually say something like, I've seen an 11 series Martin or a 13 series Martin. That's not the series, that's the trim. Inside the Rhodes series, you have 10, 11, 12, and 13. Can you comment briefly about which trims mean which things?
So yes, this was Chris Martin's idea. He felt that the original naming conventions for the Road Series was too busy and complicated. By the time you get into pickups and cutaways and stuff, he felt like he used to call it hieroglyphics. So he got rid of the DM blah 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 and wanted to go extend the idea of the traditional Martin naming convention, like D18, style 18 means mahogany back and sides and a spruce top and blah blah blah. So when you get down in the Road series, it's not the 11 series like the 15 series. It's like you said, 11 is the level of trim, and I would still call it, to me, because I'm old fashioned Martin, style 11. So you have 10, you have 11, you have 12, you have 13. Um, Style 10 is solid sapele back and sides and a solid sapele top, but it doesn't have any binding. So so it's the simplest, most affordable satin body finish, white domino dots, that Art Deco white dot fretboard that Martin brought into their guitars in the 1930s, and it will either have a black pickguard or a tortoiseshell pickguard, depending on the availability. So you may see them online or in shops with one or the other, but it's still the same guitar. And it looks, to me, in my eye, it looks like style 17 from the 1930s, which was very
Yeah.
simple, very woody looking guitar. Though it has the modern day black and white rosette. And then when you get up into style 11, you have the option of having the solid sapele top or a solid spruce top. And then you get binding. You get like a dark binding. So those make those guitars, the spruce top one, look more like style 18, except it has the new perloid, which is very cool. Uh, it's faux mother of pearl with figuring in it, that and the sound hole rosette. So you don't get the traditional black and white ply lines. You get this solid shimmery piece of perloid, and but otherwise still got the domino dots, and so it's like a step up with a rose. I mean, not a rose, but a spruce top or a sapele top. Um, and like you said, the GPC is one of the more popular guitars in that lineup. When you get up into 12, that's where you get into the fine Koa veneers, and They were making some 12s with some solid tone woods. I think that's all been suspended because of the whole COVID supply chain thing. Martin is
Yeah.
really focusing on the most popular models. That doesn't mean that they're getting rid of them entirely, but if these beautiful, fine veneer guitars continue to sell well, that may be what they just go with. And do you have any 12s? Yeah, you have some 12s in stock right now, don't you?
We do. We have the D12E, which is the traditional with the pickup system, and the limited edition D12, which Martin just released not too long ago. And I think it was one of the guitars you've done in our most recent video session, which is really interesting because you get a D12 with no pickup at all. And I think that's going to be aimed at anybody who, A, doesn't need a pickup at all, or B, you might want to put your own kind of pickup in. But yeah, the 12s are in stock here at the time of this taping. And I really think one of the next videos I'm going to put together that you helped me with was the D12 versus a D18. Because going back to one of the quotes from that video, the D12 and the Road Series in general is such a bang for your buck. But yeah, we do have the 12s right now.
Yeah, the fact that I'm glad you brought that up because that's 12, what I would call style 12, but that level of trim, that was made to specifically please Chris Martin. He wanted a Road Series instrument that looked like a traditional Martin. So it's got a traditional Martin rosette. I don't know if it's exactly the same as a D28 or for a while, the D18 and the D28 had the same rosette. Now the D18 is now back to a vintage style 18 rosette. But the D12 has a rosette that has a single ring on the outside and then multiple rings on the inside. So it looks like, with a black pickguard, it looks like a D18 from the 90s and the early 20th century. So, and I love the fact that they are offering these up without pickups. And they might do more of that if they sell well, because some people don't need a pickup, one thing, but still want the price point. Other people don't like the sound of a Fishman undersaddle pickup. So if they want to have a pickup installed, like a K&K or a Trance Amulet, which is similar to the system that Neil Young uses in his Martins, they can buy this and then have any pickup they want, or just use a sound hole pickup, or use something like that. So I think that's a really cool idea. Though it is nice to have the plug and play aspect of the factory installed with a volume and tone sweep wheel inside the sound hole and that battery entry at the butt end of the guitar and all that. So I can see the appeal to either one. And I believe right now still the D12 is still available in solid sapelli as well as in the very beautiful Koa veneer. But I believe from some of my Martin insiders is the solid wood version may be going away at least for a while, so they can focus, so they can use that wood for some of their other models. But that may not be true. I don't know if that's really going to happen or not.
Well, as usual, you will find out way before me.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's funny. Lori and I have been in business since 2003, and we are still trying to figure out, how did Spoon know that? I don't even know that. And she just shrugs her shoulders like, I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's.
I can see you smiling through this podcast. Stop it. Get that grin off your face.
Yeah. My Cheshire grin. So yes, so that's the traditional Road Series. If you want a Martin that looks like a traditional Martin with a traditional rosette, the D12's the way to go. And then you have the 13s with the beautiful veneers, and they're a little, they're just a little fancier, just like in other Martin series. As you go up the food chain, you get into bright white binding, and you get into what else do you get with the 13s? Well, now there's new Ziricote, and then of course that's where they're putting the full gloss. Thank you, full gloss body, and that's where you get into the SC, the special SC models. So the SC13E, the SC13E Ziricote, the SC13's special, and special sunburst. I guess the Zero Cody is the special, and then they have the special Sunburst, which has a amber burst that is not exactly like their other amber bursts, and I think that's those are also really cool guitars.
Okay, so looking at the Rhodes series globally, you can do Triple O, Dreadnought, Dreadnought Cutaway, GPC, SC, and you can go from trim 10 all the way to trim 13. Two-part question for Spoon Phillips on the record. What is your favorite size, and what is your favorite tone wood?
Well, I was always the Triple O OM man for most of my life, but when it comes to the Rhodes series, first of all, I always really liked the 12s. I liked the traditional look of the Triple O 12 and the D12, but that was until the Zero Cody veneer guitars showed up. The fine Zero Cody veneer, when I actually played them and realized how much that Zero Cody on the inside was filling up the voice with that rosewood-like richness and mid-range harmonics. I think those GPCs 13s with Zero Cody just look and sound awesome. Of course, I like the new cool SC 13s as well, the 13 fret hybrid, but that's something we may want to talk about in more detail another time, those guitars specifically, because they're just, even though they're in the Rhodes series, they're genuinely different than the other Rhodes series guitars. And we could probably talk about, spend an entire hour just talking about those. So I'll go with the GPC 13E Zero Cody.
Tell him what he's won. My affection.
I'm proud to have it.
Well, this has been a really cool conversation, Spoon. I really think the Rhodes series is definitely worth talking about in depth. I know a lot of my customers and our listeners really, really owe it to themselves to put the Rhodes series on their list. I'm not even sure those players who are looking to spend between $800 and $2,000. I'm not sure everybody really puts the Rhodes series high up on the list. I want to say on the record, if you're looking to spend any kind of money on a Martin guitar, even if you can justify spending a lot more than this, you owe it to yourself to take a look at some of these Rhodes series instruments, especially if you're one of those players that are going to take it on stage and find a good use for having a pickup system on board. The Rhodes series instruments from Martin Guitar are a really, really great solution, and I think it's been a really good conversation from my end. Can you think of anything else, Spoon?
Well, that's a very good place to wind up. I remember seeing somebody in concert. I honestly can't remember who it was. Wasn't Counting Crows, wasn't Bare Naked Ladies, but it was somebody in that genre era. And their guitar player kept changing guitars every song. Somebody would bring him, now that he was in the big time, he had this huge collection. He had almost every small luthier brand you could think of and all of the big luthier brands you could think of, and they all sounded exactly the same because they were coming through a pickup and a preamp and a board and a sound system and giant speakers in a giant hall, and there was virtually no difference in the tone. So if you're going to be out there looking for a guitar that you like to play, we didn't even mention the necks in these guitars. These guitars are made with the performing artist profile, which is a very comfortable, very low. It's not their lowest, but it's got a different shape than the modified low oval. So it feels to me like I'm flattening my hand out a little more, and it reminds me of electric guitars a little more. And we didn't even get into that. But if you're looking for a guitar that you're mainly going to use plugged in, so that you're mainly going to be hearing the Fishman pickup system and whatever pedals you're going through, the Rhodes series is a no-brainer in terms of the, again, best bang for the buck.
That's a really good point. I could imagine a lot of our customers and our listeners considering spending money on a standard series Martin and then putting an undersaddle pickup in that and taking it to a gig. It certainly isn't fair to say that they don't have a different experience in their hands, and the way a guitar feels when you're playing it means as much or more than what the audience is hearing. But I'd be willing to bet if you put an undersaddle Fishman in a D28 and take it on stage, put it up against a D12E, you're going to get a very, very similar sound at front of house where the audience is hearing you. And I'll put that argument up against anybody. I really do believe that these guitars are an extremely good value. And I think if you're, like you said, the end result is to get a good stage sound and have a good sounding Martin guitar. If you're not looking at the Rhodes series, you're just not doing your due diligence.
And another cool thing, people ask me what I like about the Rhodes series, and I often forget to mention the onboard tuner. There's an onboard tuner in the sound hole, and that's just a big plus for people on stage to tune up very quickly. It mutes the sound when you turn it on. Very quickly tune up without having to go look for a tuner or look down at a tuner or whatever. It's right there. One more reason for people to think about Rhodes series guitars.
Well, thanks, Spoon. This has been a really interesting conversation. I do believe the Rhodes series is certainly worth a look, and hopefully our listeners got some good value out of this podcast. From all of us at Maury's Music, thanks for listening.
We look forward to you joining us next time.
This has been a presentation of Maury's Music, your trusted source for Martin and Blue Ridge guitars. Find us online at maurysmusic.com.